More of these stories at townhall.com. I'm John Scott.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, and our co-host, Leland Faegre, is with us today. And we're on every week here at America Matters, and we stream worldwide at www.americamatters.us. And once again, there is no surfeit of things to talk about.
Did you say Smollett?
Smollett? I did, yes. I kind of slurred the word, didn't I?
There's a Smollett, all right.
Yes. And so revelations in the Smollett case and lawsuits against the media for their outrageous libeling of the boys in the Covington case. Those are two of the topics that we have in the news today regarding the continuing struggle of race and ethnicity and identity politics in America.
And so important is this, apparently, to Clarence Thomas, that he is now suggesting they go back and revisit the libel law.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with an example where a Supreme Court justice ever advocated particularly so for a particular issue. Is there a precedent for that?
I am not aware of any, but it's certainly possible. I mean,
there's nothing illegal about it.
Yeah, they write dissents, short dissents when the Supreme Court refuses to take a case, such has been the case with a lot of gun laws that the Supreme Court has passed on granting certiorari to litigants on, and then they object and say that we have to continue to take a look at Heller, and we're neglecting our duty by refusing to hear these cases.
And they have, from time to time, at speaking engagements, addressed certain issues. But it's rare, it's not very common, and here he's putting himself right in the middle of this subject.
Okay, did he indicate where he wanted to go with his?
Yeah, I have it bookmarked here. I'll check it, and we'll come back to the subject. But I thought it was fascinating that he's on top of this issue in real time.
Yes, and those who want to glorify Mr. Smollett as soon as he reported this incident are now backing away from it. Prominent politicians like Kamala Harris.
And they've gotten rid of their tweets on the subject and everything.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi deleted her tweet.
It's an embarrassing bunch of these people, isn't it?
Yes.
How do they look at themselves in the mirror?
I know, they are such peons to power now that they are. It's amazing to me that the Democratic Party, the party of Frank Church, that tried to rein in the CIA and all these other bodies, is now cheerleading for the deep state, the Democratic Party, and they call them our institutions. But perhaps it goes back to Red Empire, Blue Empire, because Blue Empire is formed around the CIA and the FBI and the State Department primarily, whereas Red Empire is primarily based around the Pentagon, but it also includes the NSA and the border patrols and so on. The NSA was the only one of those 17 so-called agencies that signed off on Russian interference in the election that gave it a tepid sign-off. They said, well, we don't have high confidence, perhaps some moderate confidence or some other hedge that they used. And the NSA apparently is more in the middle in this issue, and perhaps even over in the red state, Red Empire section of the deep state. But gee, we got to get rid of the deep state entirely.
Entirely.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a very slow slog, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
The question you asked, it was the 1964 decision on First Amendment precedent that created the barrier for public figures to claim libel. That's what he wants to go and readdress.
Yeah. But Smollett and the young boy from Covington High School, they're not public figures per se. I mean,
No,
Smollett maybe because he's an actor.
Right.
Yes.
That's why he's set himself up in this in the middle of this discussion. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens because, again, to be fair, it has not proceeded to its final denouement. We just know that the grand jury, well, we have reports that the grand jury is questioning his two accomplices, the Nigerian bodybuilders, and but we, it sounds like one of those emails you get from Nigeria. My uncle has come into $5 million, and he just needs you to send $10,000 to claim the money.
And if any of our listeners has seen the show, please give us a call. We'd like to know what the hell it's all about. So.
Well, it's the other factor is the wall and emergency powers, and I was reminiscing a little bit with this whole brouhaha over the president's ability to declare an emergency, and I was reminded of a fellow named Eugene Schroeder in the 1990s with the American Farm Movement in Colorado. And Eugene wrote a series of books about national emergencies that had a lot of patriots up in arms and wondering why the heck do we declare these national emergencies and what does it mean? And his main thesis was that and that was, remember, the 90s was the era of the FEMA, fear of the FEMA camps and the Ohio militias and everything, and a lot of different things. It was when Aaron Russo was stomping around Nevada and trying to become a Libertarian Party president after he failed as governor here. And there was a lot of concern about these emergencies and whether they would be capable of suspending the Bill of Rights and, putting Americans in dire danger, and that we are the enemy. And
you mean you and I?
You and I are the enemy of the state.
Oh, you mean the American people?
The American people, yes. No, not me particularly. I was just, I wasn't...
I was going to say, speak for yourself.
Yeah. But that the American people had actually become the enemy of the state in some way, and that these emergencies were a real danger. And now it's more or less a question of whether Trump has the authority to do this emergency and what it means for the Constitution, and maybe we'll get back to talking about that after the break.
Well, if that is really the only issue, then I think he's won this, because it's very clear to me that all of the previous examples were not much.
Mm-hmm.
Gimme candy, gimme candy, gimme candy, USA.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
Well, I guess nobody has seen The Empire because they didn't call it.
No, nobody. Yeah, frankly, it's one of the all-black shows and on the air, and I never got into it. And I think it's about rap music or building an empire based on the music industry.
Oh, no wonder I haven't heard about it.
I'm not even sure. So it becomes a soap opera type of deal, after a while. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not putting down the show because I haven't seen it, but it's interesting that Mr. Smollett would pull this and that he would use the old cliche about being a noose put around his neck. I think that was already tried in the last couple of years by another hate crime hoax referring to a noose. I think it was on a college campus that somebody claimed that there was a noose put up in a sign, a racial slur sign, and it turned out that it was just a hoax again.
Almost all of them have turned out to be a hoax. Yeah.
Yes. Even the anti-Semitism threats to a synagogue turned out to be done by a maladjusted Jewish boy that actually phoned in all the anti-Semitism threats. And we've seen this quite a bit, too, where the people that are the alleged victims are the ones perpetrating the hoax. It's
Same in the Mueller probe.
Yes.
You know, they are guilty of the behavior that they're accusing the Trump administration of.
Oh yeah. Well, I've talked about it from Psychology 101. A lot of the crimes that we accuse others of doing, like Iran and Russia and so on, are actually crimes that we're perpetrating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the best defense, I guess.
Yes, but you were going to look up the national emergency.
I do. I have it here. Yeah. Introduced by Peter Rodino in Massachusetts in 1975 to effectively revoke the previous protocols for issuing an emergency proclamation. That's how we got here. And there are 31 currently in effect right now, all of them addressing unique binary relationships around the globe, from the Sudan to Iran. Lots of them on Iran, by the way.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Schroeder, whom I briefly mentioned, was a good guy. He was a veterinarian in Colorado, and it was a harbinger of things to come, because his movement was a throwback to the original populist agrarian movement. So the late 19th century, he wanted to enforce parity, which is that the government would guarantee the price level for farms and so on. But he was very concerned about these national emergencies, and his thesis was that in 1914, during or before World War I, President Wilson Congress passed, and he signed a Trading with the Enemy Act, which forbade American citizens from trading with the Germans during World War I. And there were quite a few German Americans at that time, and it really hurt a lot of German distillers. I understand it went out of business because of these acts like this at that time, targeting our German citizens. But Dr. Schroeder's thesis was that in 1933, President Roosevelt changed it and added. Put in the American people as the enemy that the government was focusing on, and amended the Trading with the Enemies Act, and that's what started all of these emergencies. And people were afraid that we're talking about how if we could only get rid of these emergencies, we could get rid of a lot of administrative agencies. And
it didn't impede Wall Street from sponsoring Hitler. I mean, they were some of the earliest backers.
Yes.
Henry Ford, among others, General Electric, General Motors, all had relationships with Germany going into the war. So that precedent or pretense going into the new, I guess it was signed into law in 1976 by President Ford, somehow got watered way down, because it was no longer effectively precluding sponsorships of dictators around the world.
And I think part of the concern was that Roosevelt used emergency powers to take away the gold from the people, for one thing.
Yep, gold was one of the targets. Yep, of course. It's always gold.
So, but nowadays, these emergencies are often trivial. Like, emergency was declared by President Obama regarding the swine flu. And do you remember Gerald Ford had a problem with the swine flu? He tried to vaccinate people. More people got sick from the vaccinations than were getting sick from the flu.
I think some of that is still going on.
Yeah. And also Ebola. I mean, there was 2 or 3 cases of potential Ebola contamination by American nurses and so on coming back from Africa, and that was the pretext for a declaration of emergency. And nothing really happened. I don't think anybody actually got infected by Ebola from these people. And, so these emergencies have had a pretty insignificant basis. And I'm not clear why they even declare these emergencies, except to get some publicity for what they're doing.
Yeah, and because of the urgency. But, I mean, if Congress is worth anything, they can just drive up K Street and figure out how they're going to address some of these issues that currently the president needs to sign in an executive order arrangement. I just think that most of this, I mean, they're not considering taking up the constitutionality of the act, the Emergency Act, but it seems to me that's what they should be doing, is addressing the constitutionality of the National Emergencies Act before they go precluding the likelihood of a particular signature on, say, border security, which is what why we're discussing it at the moment, why it's come up, in this context.
And there is a case that during the Truman administration, when President Truman tried to nationalize segments of the economy based on an emergency, and the Supreme Court struck it down. And in the decision, this was the rule they laid out. He said the president's powers to enact emergency are at their strongest when Congress agrees with them. Mm-hmm. They're at the middle ground when Congress is tepid and doesn't agree or disagree, but they're at their weakest when Congress disagrees with the president. And I think the opposition is going to try to hang their hat on that, but in the meantime, Congress passed a statute that seems to give the president this kind of power.
Yes, and how many of those former emergency declarations were ever challenged to the Supreme Court?
I don't know. Yeah,
only this one.
Only this one?
Only Trump, see? Trump is the les resistance.
Yes, and we just heard today that the new Attorney General says that the Mueller investigation is coming to an end, and he expects to release, I think, at least the executive summary next week.
If there is, I mean, CNN is reporting that whatever Mueller is going to do, if he's going to do anything, because I think there's value in not doing anything from his perspective, because they have nothing.
Right.
So from my perspective, they're not going to say much about it. They're not going to articulate too much about this 2-year, very expensive hoax of an investigation. But if they do release anything, it will be to marginalize his popularity, his approval ratings. That's the main goal of the report. Because if they can get those numbers way down, then he has less of a chance to be reelected in 2020. That's really what the objective is all about, and it has always been about.
Oh yeah. If they can't either get him out before the election or damage him so that he won't be reelected.
Yeah.
And
because they know damn well there's no collusion. They know there's nothing there. What they'll do is they'll cite the successful prosecutions. They'll cite Flynn. They'll cite. The others, the 13 Russians, and that's what they will do, to celebrate their successful prosecutions. That's what they'll do, but they won't get anything on Trump.
No, and it's a good thing, because you can't elect someone to be president and then within a couple of months of him taking office start investigating him.
Well, they were investigating him before he took office.
Yeah, they were.
The timeline is very, very interesting, and McCabe's singing at the moment to whoever will hear him, whoever will listen to him, and I think the motivation here is that he wants to protect himself from the entangling conspiracy that goes all the way to the Oval Office, whether it will publicly be acknowledged at some point or not. That's where it started. They were trying to protect Hillary by exonerating her crimes and then by precluding the opportunity for Trump to become president at all. That's what the motivation of the conspiracy was all about.
Yep, and I'm definitely shocked about it, and I don't think anything like this has happened in our country so rapidly when somebody gets elected who is the first complete businessman who never held a government office, so he is an outsider, and he comes in with new policies, and they just cannot be accepted by the deep state denizens. And
not just new policies, but patriotic policies, policies that put America first for the first time in my lifetime. I mean, I've never expected to see anybody ever sit in the Oval Office that actually had red, white, and blue coursing through his veins.
Right.
This is the first president that actually put America first. They were all globalists prior to him, and he's celebrating that. He celebrates in that role, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is great to watch, and hopefully we will see more of it. But there is room for criticism of Mr. Trump, and when we come back, maybe we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Caribbean again.
Which area of the Caribbean are we going to talk about?
Well, I since nobody else is talking about it, why not talk about what's going on in Haiti?
Oh, Haiti. Oh, that would be a good place to start. Yeah.
It was given a bad word. I didn't even want to say it. I hesitated.
Hi, I'm Bill Kendall. I've practiced law in Northern Nevada for over 25 years, and I specialize in representing injured people in their fights for just compensation and in representing parents in custody and visitation disputes.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900, extension 2. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, and my co-host, Leland Faegre, is joining me. And we'd like to give a shout out to our main sponsor, which is Reno Computer Services. They are Reno's premier internet provider and computer repair, malware removal, and data recovery. Reno Services features virus and malware removal, data recovery, and a preventive approach that delivers reliable, consistent, and secure PC performance. You can reach them at 775-737-4400 or on the internet at www.renocomputerservices.com. Yes, and as I've mentioned a couple of times, I work for a major airline, and we have a travel alert for our neighbor to the south, Haiti. And Haiti has been experiencing the Caribbean version of Le Gilet Jaune that is going on in France.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, as they have been erupting in riots for several weeks now. And there is also, from what passengers are telling me, a State Department warning about going to Haiti. And I haven't seen a single thing on the news, nothing at all.
Absolutely nothing about that.
Yes. And according to Russia Today, they are saying down with the U.S., and they're burning American flags, and they're asking Putin for help.
Asking Russia for help, yeah.
Yes. But of course, we all know that Putin is one of the most despised people in the world, you know.
Even among his own people.
Yes, even among his own people. That's why he has to murder all these journalists and so on. But the Haitians are claiming. Well, let's look at a little bit of history of Haiti just briefly. I mean,
do we have to?
Well, Haiti was the first successful slavery uprising at Toussaint Louverture, and they managed to fend off 3 French invasions under Napoleon to try to restore Haiti to a French colony. And what that did was it kind of bled Napoleon so that he needed cash, and he gave us the Louisiana Purchase, without which America would not have grown to anywhere near it is today. So we hold a certain debt of gratitude to Haiti. They have never been very successful governing themselves, it is true. They were under dictators, the Duvalier family, Papa Doc and Baby Doc Duvalier. Mm-hmm. And the Dominican Republic has created a hard border with Haiti, and is one of the few countries in the Western Hemisphere that does not have birthright citizenship, at least at the moment.
Do they have a wall?
I don't know if they have a wall. I don't think they have a wall, but they do try to keep the Haitians out from coming across the border because of all the troubles in that country. But how much, again, it's hard to parse out how much is due to the people themselves and how much is due to outside influences, namely the U.S. And they are very mad at the U.S., and they should be. And they should also be very mad with the Clintons, because it is...
I think they are.
Yeah, they are, I believe, yes. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't heard that they're mentioning them by name in their demonstrations.
Probably not, but...
yeah. But the Clinton Foundation was notorious for exploiting the Haitians and siphoning off enormous amounts of money, very little of which went back into what they were supposed to be doing there as charitable works in the country. So the Haitians are in an uproar, and I also found out that part of the reason is that Venezuela under Chavez had a profit-sharing agreement, not only with the poor in Venezuela, but also with other countries in the Caribbean, one of them being Haiti. And then when the price of oil fell, which is what is the primary cause of the problems in Venezuela, I think socialism is a secondary cause, and U.S. sanctions are important too, to what's going on there. But when the price of oil fell, Chavez, that support money trickled off. But they had a priest and a liberation theology, which is a form of Catholic Marxism,
yes,
basically.
It is. Yeah, almost by definition, it's Marxism.
Yeah, who was elected, and even if you disagree with his politics, he was regime changed by the U.S. And right-wing dictators who are basically enriching their families and cronies at the expense of the people were put in place. So Haiti has gotten absolutely no coverage in the mainstream media. We don't see any talking heads talking about Haiti or trying to link it up in some way to what's going on in Venezuela.
And I'm thinking it must be because of the Clinton connection.
It could be.
They want that completely out of the narrative of what's going on. It's hard. You can't prove it, but I mean, why wouldn't there be some discussion of this, especially as it involves Putin?
Yeah. It's also interesting that there's a website called VoltaireNet, and it's a anti-interventionist website. And Thierry Masson, I believe you pronounce his name, is one of the main contributors to that website. And he is saying that we have talked before about Zbigniew Brzezinski, Mika Brzezinski's father, okay?
Zbigniew.
Okay. And how he carried on the theory that he who controls Eurasia controls the world, and he wrote a book called again, describing it as a chess game. I think it's the grand game or the chess game. It's available on Amazon, and that has largely failed. I mean, President Putin was quoted recently as saying that some people consider Eurasia a chessboard, but we consider it our home, and that was an interesting quote. But what Masson is saying on this website is that he thinks that Brzezinski may have had the strategy, but the tactics were worked out, and he calls it the Clausewitz-Rumfeld strategy, which is state destruction. Mm-hmm. And he believes the first instance was in the 80s when the U.S. backed a lot of proxy wars in what's called the Great Lakes region of Africa, including Rwanda, the Congo, and so on, that led to the deaths of 6 million people. And also, if you remember, the Cubans intervened in at least one of those countries, Angola, on the side of their person. And then it is gone to the Middle East and the Ukraine. And now it's going to hit the Caribbean basin. And so that gives us a little bit of a background as to why we're so involved in Venezuela and why Bolton called Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela the troika of evil, and and so and other outlying countries like Haiti are going to be drawn into it. And when Pompeo was talking about trying to support Random Guaido in Venezuela, the random guy. That he went
the
to
other Democratic Socialist.
Yes, he went to the Organization of American States and tried to get them to support his plan. And while some of the people in the Organization of American States are pro-U.S., many are not. And so he went, therefore, he and Cynthia Freeland and Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government formed the Lima Group, which is an outside ad hoc group that is supporting our regime change operation in Venezuela. which
also doesn't get any attention.
No, it hasn't now. It's fallen off the radar right now because I think it's becoming more obvious that we didn't have a plan B, that Bolton and Pompeo picked this guy, Guido, and he doesn't have control over any real assets, government assets. The military are not behind him, and calling whatever you may think of Maduro, he's not a dictator. He was elected, and the elections were certified internationally as free and fair. The irregularities around the election are internal political irregularities, like it's not uncommon in a parliamentary democracy for some parties not to participate in an election, to boycott the election. And because a couple of parties boycotted the election, there's no reason to say that it was illegitimate. And other countries are saying that the ballot boxes were stuffed, but they don't use ballots. They use a very good electronic voting count mechanism, which has been highly praised by outside observers. And also finding it again, kind of ironic that while McCabe and America is so upset over trying to use the 25th Amendment to oust President Trump, the U.S. and the European Parliament cited Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution as their reason for supporting Random Guido, when it has nothing to do. I mean, just like the 25th Amendment, it's simply not applicable to this situation.
What page of the Constitution was that on?
I know. Their Constitution is, I think, 145 pages long.
Runs about 10 blocks long.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know how any of that can have any real meaning in the sense of the discussion.
Oh, sure. They promise all kinds of positive rights that are almost impossible to grant. But the fact is, it's not a reason for regime change, and it's shocking how these politicians and the globalist politicians disregard basic law. But we'll get back again after the break.
The deep state is in plain view with regards to Venezuela, for sure. And I guess a judge has given Michael Cohen 2 more months of freedom.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we'll talk about that after the break.
Has the healthcare nightmare got you feeling sick and tired?
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the show.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Truth to Power, Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I am your host, Brendan Trainor, and my co-host, Leland Faegre. And we've been talking about various sundry things, wars and emergencies and revolts in nearby countries. And where would you like to go for the last portion of the show?
Oh, my gosh, that's a good question. You want to talk about Sanders?
Okay.
Bernie Sanders?
Well, we had several new people announced for the presidency in the past week. One of them was Pocahontas, as she will be called.
Isn't she a mess?
Yeah, I know.
Honestly.
And, who wants to elect, your maiden aunt? Who well, I know she's not really maiden, she has a husband, but still she acts like your maiden aunt that you don't even want to invite to your Christmas party because she's going to start scolding everybody, and that's basically my impression of Elizabeth Warren.
This is my impression of Elizabeth Warren right here. You can't see it, but her hand is flailing because that's all she ever does when she gets on the stage.
And she's so earnest, very, very earnest.
Genuine, yeah.
And then we had Miss Klobuchar, the...
Are you like me? Do you have Amy Klobuchar fever after that town hall meeting the other night?
She's the feminist version of the boss in 9 to 5. We should call her Dabney Coleman.
Somebody should put a fork in her. I mean, do her a favor and just say, here's the exits.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. Supposedly, according to Al Franken's people, when he was still in office, before he got outed, that they were at an event in Michigan, and she was late. She sent a trembling intern over to tell him that Miss Senator Klobuchar says she'll be an hour late, and it's all my fault.
Apparently, she frightens everybody she deals with.
Yeah.
She's not particularly likable. No. Insufferable woman, it would appear to me. Yeah.
And then we had the faux scandal of the news people that were caught helping Kamala Harris go shopping. And
helping her try on clothes.
Yes, and everything.
Honestly. CNN.
Yeah, I know.
What's their mantle? What is their slogan that sets them up as the superlative source for information? I can't think of it off the top of my head. But I mean, it just...
Your source for news, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just embarrassing, some of the stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
But going back to Sanders, he did collect a whole bunch of money overnight. Since his announcement, $6 million, and $600,000 of it apparently is on an automatic payment in the future basis. So he's going to have some money to go with his. I think he'll court Biden, don't you think? Won't that be the strategy here? If Biden decides to get in, that is.
Yeah, he'll court him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sanders is like your favorite uncle that comes with presents for everybody at the Christmas dinner. Yeah, no, but it's
Uncle Joe.
Uncle Bernie. But it's just a continuing parade of power seekers, and of course, Mr. Booker, he was calling for an anti-lynching law because of what supposedly happened to Justin Smollett, as if it's not already against the law to hang somebody.
Yeah, well, they need another one on top of that.
Yes, of course, yeah. just to make us all feel good. And the endless parade is coming, and the only one that stands out to me is that has any hope of stirring my. And I did actually send her a small contribution, and that's Tulsi Gabbard in Hawaii. And she's been in New Hampshire, and, you know, even though I cringe sometimes at some of her economic proposals, and I kind of refute them when I retweet her, but her foreign policy proposal is just too sane to get anywhere in the establishment. I hope that she at least gets to the first debate and is able to present some kind of debate, although the stage will be so crowded. And they'll probably ask her...
There's 22 already, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah.
They'll probably ask her blasé questions about the economy, and they may not even get around to asking her.
Probably won't give her a chance to speak on this.
Yes.
Well, where she belongs, of course, is in committee. You know, the Republicans have been smart. They would have given her, you know, leadership of a foreign relations committee or something like that, where she could, you know, address these issues, because that's where her her interest in foreign policy should be.
Right.
That is her salient feature, her relevance, and I think the Republicans did themselves a disservice by not putting her in a leadership role in some.
You mean the Democrats? Or?
Well, either party actually. The Republicans wouldn't have been smart enough to do that, you know, because she's not hawkish enough. But I think the Republicans should have done that. I mean, I bet you if Rand Paul were on the phone, he'd agree with us.
Yeah, I think so. Somebody call Rand and get him on the phone.
Yeah.
But you know, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey and Justin Amash, and the late congressman.
Oh yeah, that just passed away.
Oh yes. Yeah. There are few voices for sanity. Mike Lee is another one, and the rest of the Congress is pretty much, you know, nothing but power hungry, power mad.
Find a war, any war.
And find a scandal, any scandal. It's and you know, this was also President's Day week, and maybe we should reflect a little bit on George Washington and his views on this subject. And I mean, he was the only president that voluntarily stepped down and did not run for office again. He he was his farewell address should be our guiding light in foreign affairs, but it's not.
Right.
Yeah, and he said, and a passionate attachment or an inveterate hatred of other countries should not be part of our foreign policy. But we have passionate attachments and inveterate hatreds among many people these days. Excuse me, folks. And so he also was against excessive partisanship. And that's certainly
Yeah, well,
a mark.
that was a feature of the narrative at that time. All of them declared their reluctance to commit to factions. But I think that's, that was unique to the inception of the founding documents. I don't think it's much after that. It was
Yeah,
they
I
were
know.
at each other's, at each other's throats. So it was a very, very unique set of circumstances that they had to address,
Mm-hmm.
both externally and internally. So,
And Madison thought that the separation of powers would keep the factions in check. In other words, his idea was that the factions would cancel each other out. And we might be seeing a little bit of that today with the gridlock in Congress. But overall, it must be thought that Madison underestimated the ability of politicians to log roll and to scratch each other's backs and to give up certain of their ideological goals in order to get other more ideological goals in a constant back and forth where, all right, you it continues to grow the state, down through the generation.
right.
And so gridlock is, for most of us freedom lovers, gridlock is preferable to that kind of log rolling, and we are getting